Hi everyone, I hope everyone is doing well. I have another game for you guys from the World Open. This is the 5th round of the tournament and I'm playing the U2000 section. My opponent, Matthew Freeman, his ELO is about 1904 and at the moment I'm standing at 1886. So let's dive straight into the game and let's see what we can learn. So my opponent opens up with e4. And nowadays, I pretty much automatically reply with the Sicilian, so c5. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. So yet again, we have another Rossolimo. There are a few options here for black, but typically I reply with e6. I feel like this opening I've developed good knowledge behind why e6 is played. Similar to my last video, you just want to develop your g knight to e7 to protect the knight on e6. So white's plan is to double up your pawn, and that's pretty much the key idea. But in this game, my opponent decides to take on c6, so he doesn't castle. In our previous game, my opponent castled. So now, typically you want to take towards the center. Although d takes c6 is fine, I'm not very familiar with this line, so usually I reply with taking toward the center and my bishop can get out on a6, stuff like that. So I take b takes c6, my opponent castles, knight e7, so let's continue with our plan, because if I put the knight on f6 then it might get attacked and then so on and so forth. So knight e7 with the idea to go to g6. My opponent plays d3. So he wants to keep it closed because he wants c5 to be a liability in my position. So c5 at the moment is a weakness, or these double pawns are pretty much black's weakness. Knight g6, so continuing with this plan, because eventually I want to get the bishop out and castle. Very simple. Knight bd2, so very standard. Although this is a slight inaccuracy by white, I think a computer line was like rook e1 and so on and so forth. I think rook e1 was a bit more accurate, but let's continue. Knight d2. Bishop e7, so we're continuing with our plan of castling. Rook e1 now, d5. So before I castle, I want to question the center. Because if white takes on d5, then I solve my double pawns. So of course, they can, but white doesn't take on d5 to solve my double pawn issue. So b3. Very logical human move, so he wants to fianchetto the bishop and put it on this long diagonal. That's white's plan. I castle. White fianchettos the bishop. Very standard. a5. So the idea of a5 is anytime you have a structure like this, either on the queen side or the king side, if there is a free way, or if there is a path to kind of undermine the structure, even if it's on the king side like this, if that pawn was on g3, usually you want to somehow break it. So I think a5, the idea of a5 is just simply go a4, or even not take on b3, but play a3, so even take more space on the queen side. So that's why my opponent doesn't allow this. So a4 I think was a good move, because it stops his pawn from advancing. Bishop a6. So now I've moved my a pawn such that my bishop is not in front of that pawn. So I thought this was very logical. And my goal with this move is to, of course, play c4. Because if I can get some... Well, at the moment the bishop is just hitting a very strong pawn on d3, because d3 is well supported. So I think c4 is my idea, to break up the queen side. g3. So I think with g3 my opponent pretty much creates room for the king and just doesn't allow this knight move yeah, pretty much controlling f4 and h4. Rook b8. The idea, if I rush with c4, I think it's not as strong. The idea of rook b8 is to keep an eye on this bishop, because after c4 the b pawn cannot take, you're dropping the bishop. So that's the idea. Rook b1, just getting on the half open file, because from a8 it wasn't doing much. h4, and now my opponent, being clever, seeing that the knight is on g6. Usually when the knights are on these squares, so g6, b6, g3, and g3 and b3, usually you want to throw your side pawn to try to attack it. In this case, white, I think it's a very logical move. He tries to expand on the king side and take tries to attack this knight on g6. So in this position, I pretty much rushed with c4. There was a better way to, there was a more slower way to achieve c4. Because if you rush with c4, then your opponent has this move, h5. And then the key square in this position is e5. If you can control e5 before you play c4, it's much stronger. For example, a really strong move is actually f6. You want to control e5 and then play c4. Even though if h5 looks like an annoying move, well, you can play knight h8, knight f7 without worrying about c6. Because as soon as this knight jumps on e5, it attacks c6, so trying to do this fork, and also it attacks c4. So that's why not allowing this knight move forward with a threat on c6 is very important. That's why we have to play f6. So let's go back. In the game, I missed this idea that white has. After h5, he can move the knight on e5. So I rushed. c4 is not a great move in this position, because my opponent played h5, and now the only square I can move forward, the only square, knight h8. And now my opponent has this nice move, knight e5. And of course, well, first he takes. He takes, I take, and then he has knight e5. So now he's ready to win a pawn. So if I had played f6, this move would not have been possible. And now he's threatening f4, so I'm pretty much losing a pawn in this position. But let's continue. Queen c7. Queen c8 was a tiny bit more accurate, but I think queen c7 is a very human and logical move. Knight takes c4. And now if I take, these knights defend each other. So at the moment I want to keep the bishop pair. And white doesn't have to take with this pawn because he's dropping this bishop. So the knights are fairly well protecting each other. I played f6. Now f6 is a bit slow because this knight was able to maneuver, and now I'm creating room for this knight to get out, things like that. So f6 in this position, it already looks a bit risky. And if we turn the engine on, yeah, white is doing really well, +1. But white has to figure out. It's not like we're losing immediately, because these bishops, the position is somewhat open. We traded a couple of pawns and these bishops are coming to life now. And that's why it's not a clean, it's not very clear for white to like take advantage of the position, because these bishops are a bit opened. So queen g5. What's the idea? To take on e6. And it comes with check. There is a clever move in the position. So I'll give you guys a few seconds. What should we do about this threat? So if you say knight f7, this is a clever move. In the game, I missed this move. Because if my opponent carelessly takes on e6, well, that's a bad move. What can we do in this position? Bishop c8, and where's this queen going? The queen is trapped. Because this move, queen takes e6 doesn't come with check because the knight already blocked the check. So bishop c8, and now all of a sudden the queen is trapped. And now the queen doesn't have any safe squares to go to. So in the game I missed knight f7. I played bishop c8. Knight f7 would have been nice because you indirectly defend e6 and your knight is getting ready to jump forward. So it would have been nice if I had found this move. So e5 now, just gaining space. If I take on e5, it's terrible. First of all, I'm losing an exchange because this knight is very strong attacking d6. So I have to keep the position closed. And doing so, this bishop becomes a bit silly. So e5 maybe wasn't the best approach because now this bishop is pretty much blocked on its own pawn. But at the same time, white gains some space. So queen e2. Now bishop a6, pinning the knight to the queen. Rook a d1, so centralizing all the pieces. It looks like white is fully developed, and but the thing in this position is white doesn't really have a concrete plan. Like, how do you continue with white? Can you really attack the king side? Well, it's kind of closed now. So that's why, even though white's up a pawn, in this position, it's not so easy to take advantage of black's king side, because all of my pieces are kind of protecting the king. And these pawns being on light squares is actually good because white doesn't have a light square bishop, so these pawns are actually doing a good job of defending the king side. Bishop b4. This is a nice move because I'm putting these bishops on these diagonals, and now white realizes that these bishops they can do a bit of a damage in the position, so white decides to play c3. Well, I wanted white to play c3. First of all, it makes this bishop look silly. Now it's biting on its own pawn, and at the same time, as soon as this bishop moves back somewhere, I'm attacking b3. So I really thought bishop b4 was a nice move. An engine move was probably not to play c3. Maybe just play rook f1. But we're humans, so my opponent plays c3. And I wanted this move. I wanted to provoke c3. Because I just stepped back. And now b3 is a bit weak. At the moment it's defended, so I can't really do much. I can't really take on b3, so let's continue. King g2. Knight f7, so just developing, because in the position you need to realize the bishops are developed, the rooks, the queen is developed. This rook isn't doing much, but it's still, it might, maybe there is a move in the future playing f4, so this rook is good. You need to notice that this knight on h8 is not doing much, so you want to develop it. That's why I played knight f7, rook a1. What's the idea of rook a1? It looks like a undeveloping move, but it actually has an idea. White wants to play bishop a3 and trade off these bishops, and I allow that. So rook fd1, bishop a3, and in this position I take. The knight wouldn't want to take. You need to notice that the queen is hanging, so the only move is to take with the rook. And now this rook is a bit more passive. That's why I didn't really like this idea, but at the same time, white gets rid of their passive bishops, so he trades a more active piece for a less active bishop. So, but at the end of this plan, this rook becomes a bit passive, and my rooks are very active in the position. Rook d5, just pressurizing e5, and getting ready to double, things like that. At least that was my plan. f4, so white decides to just solidify e5. And now I double. Not the best move, but a very, very very logical move, because I'm actually threatening to take on d2, because this knight is this knight is pinned. So that's why my opponent plays Rook a2, just defending. And now c5. More accurate move would have been rook d3 in this position, I think. Let's turn the engine off. Yeah, rook d3 first. And then c5 becomes a bit more stronger. And now, even though I'm down a pawn, the computer is saying -1. Why is it saying -1? Well, king safety. And my king is pretty safe. Well, this king, now that these pawns moved forward, this king becomes more and more weak. The more pawns you push in front of your king, provided there are still some minor pieces and major pieces left on the board, the more the king becomes unsafe. So in this case, the white king is a bit loose. So I play c5. The idea of c5 is to put my bishop on b7. Rook c1. I mean, white's very passive in this position. If they move the knight, well, this knight becomes a little bit weak and is still pinned, so he plays rook c1, just defending c3. Rook d3, so getting ready to put the bishop on this long diagonal. Queen e1. I mean, white's running out of moves, it looks like, because he couldn't really move this knight like to f3, because then he gets double pawns, things like that. His position becomes more and more weak, and this knight on f7 is actually a really strong knight, because the idea of this knight is to go to h6 and g4, and now this knight is joining the attack, the bishop, the rooks, and the queen. It looks like all of black's pieces are pretty much trying to attack the king, and that's what happens. And in this case, in this setup, white doesn't really have a good way to defend the king. So that's why black is doing much better. So bishop b7 check, king f2, queen c6. So I'm just trying to go for a mate, because I'm threatening mate actually. Queen g2 would be mate. So that's why white plays queen g1, very passive. Knight h6, trying to go to g4. Just one more piece joining the attack. King e2. They're trying to escape this way. That's white's plan, is to somehow escape to this side and let this rook protect the king. Knight g4. Yeah, just adding more pressure in the position. I couldn't really figure this out, and I was also in this position, I was low on time. My opponent maybe had about 4.5 minutes, and I had about a couple minutes, and this is game 60. I think it was game 30 with 10-second delay, so I'm pretty much time is a big factor. I know I have something in the position, but I just couldn't figure it out, because at the moment these knights are actually defending the position. So f3 is defended, d3 is defended, so I couldn't figure this out. Knight g4. And in this position, my opponent takes on a5. So I'll give you guys a while to figure this out. There is actually a move that I missed in this position, so let's see if you guys can see it. So if you guys had set queen c3, it works. I didn't see this move. I was down to like a minute or less than a minute, something like that. Queen f3 actually works, because this queen sacrifice, well, let's just say knight takes. The king can go backwards, but let's look at this. Knight takes, bishop takes, and it doesn't matter where the king moves to e1 or f1. Doesn't matter. Let's put the king on f1. Check. Rook takes. and rook b. So I missed the mate in 4. And the king is boxed out. The king can't go up because of the knight, and these squares are attacked by the bishop. So the rook delivers checkmate. I missed this move. And if the king goes back, it's just, I think there is a way to just finish the game quickly. Yeah, rook e6, rook e3, and then, yeah, it's pretty much game over. So I missed this move. In the game, I played, I don't really remember what I played. I don't have the notations after this. I think I just moved the queen somewhere. Yeah, so yeah, this is a fork, and I just moved the queen to a6 or something like that. But yeah, it was very sad for me to not see this move. This game resulted in a time scramble in which I managed to actually lose. So I I didn't see this mate, and I had a couple of chances after that. But in the game, I just all the major pieces got traded. It was a knight versus queen. We both had a knight and queen left in the game, so somehow I just hung my knight, and it was a time scramble. But yeah, I thought this was a really nice game for you guys to show. And if I had seen queen f3, would have been really nice. So I hope you enjoyed this game and learned something from it. This was a different, it was a more closed Rossolimo to begin with, so d3. So that's why I wanted to show you guys this game. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.